All right, guys. Good morning. Good morning to you. It is Thursday, February 25th, 2021. This morning, we're going to be talking about the power of the interview. Let's get started.
It is ultimately important for you to look at your goals, truly what you want to do in your life, and then look at the people who you spend the most time with in your life and figure out if that lines up.
All right, guys, what's happening? Good morning. Good morning to you. Sorry for the delay this morning. In full transparency, man, I was exhausted, and I got a little extra sleep this morning. So thank you guys for being patient, and thank you guys for being here this morning. I wanted to dig in this morning to a topic that I think, a lot of people might look at this topic and say, well, it doesn't really relate to me. But in fact, it probably relates to you way more than you think. Because we are all doing this in some way, shape, or form almost constantly, right? So it's the title of the show is The Power of the Interview. And so I want to talk about all the different ways that interviews happen, right? Whether that's you being interviewed or you giving an interview, right? You being the interviewee. I want to dig into those, and I want to talk about just why those things, why interviews are so powerful, right? And how much you can learn from interviewing people or being interviewed. You can learn both directions, right? So how are the different ways that interviews go? So let's talk about that. So interviewing for a job would be an example, right? You can be interviewing someone for a job, or you can be interviewed for a job or a career or an opportunity or whatever it is. You could get interviewed on a podcast or on a TV show or, on a news channel, something like that. So you could be interviewed by a person or by a reporter. In some cases, when people get in trouble, man, the police or the FBI are doing interviews. And so when you think about that interview process, that exchange of information that people experience during an interview, you can actually learn so much from doing those interviews, right? So from being a part of it, from either being the person interviewed or being the person delivering that interview. So what are some of the things that you can do during an interview that make an interview more powerful? So I first want to say this. Number one, the key to every successful interview, to an interview that you're going to walk away from feeling like it was impactful, and whether you're the one being interviewed or the one doing the interviewing, it takes preparation, right? It takes doing a little bit of research, being prepared for that meeting, understanding a little bit about the person that you're interviewing. Now, that's not always possible, but when it is possible, you want to have as much information as you possibly can about that person, because as you learn their background, their behaviors, who they are as a person, what they care about, you're going to start to learn exactly how you should be asking questions, right? Exactly how to approach the topics that you want to talk about. And I'll speak from my own experience with regard to podcast interviews. I do quite a few of them. And so when I'm doing a podcast interview, the one thing that I always look for, the thing that really excites me about an interview, right? Because there's a lot of interviews that I do that are just kind of square peg, square hole, same interview, same questions over and over and over again. But there are some people that interview me that ask extremely meaningful questions. So how does this transition into other areas of life? Well, when you're having a conversation with someone that you want to build a relationship with, ask meaningful questions. As you get to know them, and this could be in live conversation that you're interviewing someone, right? You're sitting down and you get to know somebody and you're kind of interviewing them in conversation, aren't you? They're asking you questions, you're asking them questions, or you're asking them questions and they're answering. When you ask meaningful questions of a person, it means a lot. and it sticks out to them because typically people don't. They go and research the same questions that somebody else has asked, and they don't really do their homework. I'll give you an example. One of the things that I am big on is if I'm going to interview someone, I want to research that person extensively, right? And I want to know the things that they don't expect me to know. I want to ask them questions about the most meaningful things in their life. And the only way that I can do that is by spending the time up front researching this person. So when I do that and I ask those meaningful questions, I can literally watch the physiological change. So the body language of that person completely changes as a result of the questions that I'm asking. An example of that would be, asking someone about a part of their journey in life that is meaningful to them. Something that a family member that had a huge impact on them, family members, something about their life journey, what was difficult. How can we talk about that and bring out the real blueprint of this person, the real path to show others? So when you ask meaningful questions, whether it's in a job interview, whether it's on a podcast interview, you're always going to get results. You're always going to get great results because of the preparation that you did. And so the more that you know that person, the more comfortable they're going to be sharing that information with you, and the more they're going to respect you for the amount of time that you put in advance of that interview. The same is true, guys, with a job interview. So if you take the time to get to know that person, you can make them comfortable, and they're going to tell you more of the truth. They're going to be more themselves when you get them talking about those things in their life that are extremely important to them. Recognize someone's body language when you're interviewing them. Their body language is going to tell you a ton about them. When we're talking about the last thing on my list that I mentioned earlier about the police interviews, right? Body language is a huge piece of how the police and authorities determine whether someone is telling the truth or not. So they can sit someone down and they can interview them, and they have a tactical approach of how to figure out if someone is telling the truth or not. They cannot change their physiological response to not telling the truth. And so when we do these interviews and we get people comfortable and we ask them meaningful questions and we get them into this place of giving us the best information that they can, we're going to get the best results out of that interview. This is exactly what the police do. They try to get people comfortable. They try to ask them questions in a pattern that gets their thoughts on track. And then they start to throw curveballs at them, right? To figure out how they're trying to avoid certain things. The same is true in any type of interview if you're trying to learn things about someone. In a job interview, I will tell you straight up that I am a very easy interviewer because I want people to tell me the truth. And I know that if I get them comfortable, what they're going to share with me is probably the best version of the truth they can give me in that situation. Everyone's a little on guard. Everyone is always trying to impress during a job interview. So if I can get them to kind of calm down and disarm themselves, I'm going to get the best look at that person that I possibly can. And then I can also go back and revisit, everything that they said, and I can throw a curveball at them too. For those of you who own businesses, one of the questions that I ask at the end of an interview, and I can't remember where I got this from, but I heard it, I think on a podcast or something, is that I ask people a bunch of questions, get them very comfortable, right? I'm the easiest interview. I just want to talk to people and get to know them. And if I feel like there's something there at the end of that interview, I will ask them this question. So, Johnny, out of everything that you just told me and everything that we just discussed for the past 45 minutes or an hour, exactly how much of that is the truth? And so imagine being comfortable and feeling this person in front of you is, such a laid back person, very approachable. You're very comfortable with them, and you get that question thrown at you. The body language and the response of that person is undeniable. It makes no difference if they say I didn't tell you the truth, you will get a very good read on whether or not that person was being truthful with you. One last thing on my list of things to talk about here with regard to interviews. This is a powerful, powerful thing, and it's not just in the space of interviews, but in any aspect of life. When you get to be a master of conversations and you start to learn that listening is more powerful than speaking. When you sit at a table with a bunch of people and you're listening to a conversation, you don't just listen for what is said, but you also have to listen for what is unsaid. How are people responding to questions that make them uncomfortable? What details are people leaving out when they share their perspective? Listening for those things that are unsaid is one of the most powerful things that you can do in any setting, and specifically in a setting where people are being interviewed. And that is almost all the time. I think somebody just said it in the comments here. I'm being interviewed. Yeah, Leonard, I'm being interviewed on a daily basis. Every time I go meet and give bids to potential customers, you're also, I would add to that, man, you're being interviewed by your employees constantly, right? Every time they ask you a question, they're waiting for your response. They're analyzing how you respond, what your body language looks like, what you may not say. So listen for those things that are unsaid. It's a really powerful thing when you learn conversation, when you learn how to pick out those details in conversation, when you can watch somebody's body language and still stay 100% present to what they're saying. You know, one of the things that I see all the time, and this is why people typically fall short and don't get enough information when they're selling to a customer, when they're interviewing someone, when they're asking questions on a podcast, is because they are actually listening to respond. They're not listening to genuinely understand. And so I challenge you to think about that. You know, how present are you being? Are you able to listen for those things that are unsaid? Because when you listen for those things that are unsaid, when you listen for the details of a conversation, when you're paying attention to someone's eyes, to their body language, and to what they're saying all at the same time, the power of that interaction is unmatched. You will never understand the power of the interview until you are 100% present for a conversation. And by the way, this goes for your spouses, this goes for your employees, this goes for people that you might have conversations with just randomly in a grocery store. When you are listening and you are attentive and you are present in that moment, you will find the power of the interview to be extremely, extremely valuable. So think about that during your interactions today. How present are you? Do you have all of these things that we all possess that can distract us? Do you have those available to you when you are interacting with people? Is your phone buzzing? Is your email going off? Are the notifications on your social media lighting up on your phone to distract you? If those things are happening, you will never fully understand the power of that conversation. But if you are present and you are attentive, you ask meaningful questions and you listen for every detail, pay attention to their body language, and pay attention to what is unsaid, you will figure out the power of that interaction, the power of that interview is at a level you can't imagine. So I encourage you guys to do that as you're having your conversations today, to be present, to look people in the eyes, to have real meaningful conversations and be right where your feet are planted for that conversation. Do all the things that we talked about here. Ask meaningful questions. Pay attention to their body language. If you know them well, ask them something meaningful. And then listen. Listen with effort. Think about those words. Listen with effort. Genuinely try to listen, and you will figure out how powerful the interactions that we have with each other actually can be. That's all I got for you this morning, guys. I hope that helps you. I hope it gives you a different perspective on the interactions that you have today or the interactions that you have every day. Think about that, the power that exists within that interaction that you have with every individual person. And do you leave that person better than you found them? By the power of the questions that you ask, by the power of how attentively you listen. I hope this was helpful. Wishing you guys an awesome, awesome Thursday. And I will see you guys again tomorrow morning, same place, same time, right here on Morning Perspective. Love you guys.